So now what? Save the world?
Anyone could be one of them.
Controller.
Trust no one.
Welcome to Thoughtspeak, a podcast dedicated to the discussion of K.A. Applegate's 1996 book series, Animorphs. I am one of your hosts, Mitchell.
And I am also one of your hosts, Coleman.
And I'm Nate, and I am back.
Yes, we are very glad to have our third leg of the tripod back. Welcome back, Nate. I will just say it is good to be back talking to both of you, because if you are following this podcast in real time, you are probably aware it's been quite a while since we've posted an episode. I'm not entirely sure when we released The Extreme.
May.
But it must have been in May. And now here we are mid-July recording our next episode. And honestly, after anticipating that we'd return to a more normal recording schedule, a lot of important life stuff kind of went down. Not the least of all which, my wife got pregnant, and so a lot of time has been spent working jobs to get ready for this little bundle of joy that's coming this September. So that's my end of it. And another part of it, I feel, was just trying to coordinate between three grown adults all working jobs, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. And I mean, my family is, we're buying a house, and I started another podcast at some point and was dealing with that and writing for the internet all over the place.
Exactly.
It's been
I've
heady.
had another podcast going as well. I don't know what Nate's excuse is.
My job has been crazy the last couple months, actually. Been very busy, putting in a lot of extra hours, so...
Well, you
that's
know
been
what?
making it tough
The
to coordinate
main
for me.
reason, well, I shouldn't say the main reason, but a big reason why we've waited so long to do this is because we knew that we had to have you back for this one. This is kind of one of the more important books in the series as far as where we are in the chronology of the series. After this, we kind of get into the ghost-written filler territory. And this is one of the last books from the original authors, and this is an idea that they're returning to that was established very earlier on in the series. And I'm also very excited that, Nate, you've now read book number 1, The Invasion, correct?
Yep. As part of as prep for this podcast, you asked me to read book number 1. The last podcast I was on was for the prequel book, and forgive me, I forget the title.
It was the
Andalite
Andalite Chronicles.
That's what it was, yep.
Yeah.
So that was the previous podcast that we did, and then for this book you had me read The Invasion, and then this is The Attack.
Yep, The Invasion and
right?
The Attack.
Okay,
Correct.
cool. Yep, so I've got a little bit of background. So that was nice. It kind of picks up right where the Andalite Chronicles leaves off, which is kind of nice.
Does it now?
There's in reading this next book, of course, the Attack. There were a couple things that I was a little like, oh, okay, so this is a character now, and Eric was one of them. I was like, okay, there's an android, cool.
Yeah, you know, I guess we could have prepared you a little bit about the characters, but really...
The dog android?
They do such a good job of explaining Eric's character right there in the beginning that I thought, you'll figure it out.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, you don't know Eric's love of dogs, which that's important to me.
Is true.
That you
I
know
had no
that.
idea until just now.
Okay, yeah, well, Eric and his race, the Chi, who are these androids, they live in this underground kind of bunker area that's completely inhabited by dogs because their race pretty much shares
The Pimolites.
dog DNA within them. So, yeah.
Well, they took the Pimolites, their masters and creators from millions of years ago. They took their core, their essence, and implanted them in wolves, and that's how the modern dog was created.
Interesting. So how did they like Earth wolves?
Yeah, Earth wolves. They landed on Earth like millions of years ago, and their masters were dying because of the race that they fight.
Yeah,
in this
the Howlers.
book.
They mentioned that a
The
bit,
Howlers.
and I was wondering if you'd pick up on that. That Eric's race
Yeah.
does have this
Oh, yeah.
backstory with the
it's
the
pretty
Howlers.
explicitly explained.
Yeah.
I think a couple times.
So the Pimelites were dying, their masters, and they couldn't do anything about it because they were dying of a disease that they didn't even know what it was, created by the Howlers. And as they were dying, they took their essence and found these earth wolves and put it in them, and their masters were incredibly caring, joyful, a race of people, and so that's why it created dogs.
That's cool.
Yeah, Eric is actually a really interesting character, but, as it just so happens, this is one in which he shows a little bit of character development and growth, and so you get to see him, act a little foolishly at sometimes. But beyond the explanation of the chi, I would overall just love to hear your thoughts on the first book, now that you've actually read it, and particularly, if it was more mature than you had expected going into it.
Okay, that's a fair question. I actually thought it was... my expectations were met. I realize this is a book targeted for probably, I would guess, the 12-year-old age range.
Sure.
And I think, we were all the same. We were all the same age, or we are the same age. So we were all probably 10, 12, in that age range when these books started coming out. And
Yeah.
I feel like as a 12-year-old, it would have been probably a good read with the still be a little challenging. As an adult, it was
Still a little challenging.
it was so hard. No, I mean it was a very easy read. I was able to get through pretty quickly. It was nice because like some of the other books I've read, I'm like, oh, what does that mean? And this was like, oh, okay, just going through it, I can just consume the story without having any sort of language barriers, despite English being my first and primary language. It was just an easy read and easy to take in the story.
Well, yeah, dude, when you're going from Game of Thrones to Animorphs, there's going to be a difference in the narrative and the word usage. And yeah, it's written for generally, younger audiences. But
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know it might have been kind of hard to read about Marco eating something and not be like 3 chapters describing what he's eating.
Yep.
But, I wouldn't mind George R. R. Martin writing some Animorphs books either.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Be a lot longer than 100 pages.
If he shot for 54 books, he'd end up writing probably 300.
True.
And I'd be okay with that because I think this kind of material in a creative person's hands like that could probably do something pretty wicked with it.
And
He'd kill Cassie in the opening scene.
absolutely. I actually really think he'd put a nice adult tone to it, and I think the series would be extremely interesting with some very adult undertones, and I don't mean sexy adult undertones necessarily. I mean maybe
Erotic.
But
that's the Applegate's other series you got to read.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, it is interesting, the idea that these series come out when we're younger or whatever, and this book series does mature way further even than you've read in the book 26 where they're fighting for their lives or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you get to the end of the
it gets
series
so
and
much
they're
worse
dealing with
towards the
PTSD.
end. Oh, sure.
And they're and they're just they're sacrificing their quadriplegic friends because it might win the war. And I mean, it's crazy. But I mean, it is interesting thinking that how great would it be now that all these fans are grown up to have an adult writer do another take on the series where the premise is childish. I mean, people turning into animals to be superheroes. It is a very childish premise that the original authors kind of took a step further than the silly premise. And to have someone write it now for adults, the ridiculousness of the concept would actually be an incredibly important and interesting facet of the story. These adults with lives and families and everything, turning into wolves and attacking aliens. I think you could take an angle of it that'd be amazing.
I completely agree. I think that'd be really cool.
Absolutely. There could be a lot done with this property still to come. And, the way that Hollywood and the media is working these days, it seems like that's not actually that far off from happening.
That's true.
I mean, it's a big YA series that they have not adapted
absolutely,
yet.
and especially
really,
with all
truly.
these franchises from when we were kids kind of being rebooted and coming back and targeted not as kids today, but as kind of that more for the adult audience. I think that'd be it'd be interesting.
Absolutely.
To read.
The Power Rangers reboot that they're working on currently.
If you've been following that at all, the producers, the director, Dean Israelite, they're hardcore going into building a new audience for this. And a more mature
and making
audience.
it more for adults as well, which it's kind of scary and it's kind of awesome. I really hope it works out, and I think that the success of that will directly correlate to what they end up deciding to do with Animorphs in the future, and it'll determine its success as well.
Well, not to derail us completely real quick, but my other podcast and stuff has been following this Power Rangers movie quite a bit, and it really is interesting to see what I remember from Power Rangers. I watched the first 2 seasons or whatever that were really important to me, and it was just a silly show about them turning giant and fighting in a Megazord and fighting in the parks, the Putty Rangers and all that stuff.
I have a prediction for the movie, by the way.
Well, real quick. So it is crazy to see this new take on it where they're talking about their existential existence in the universe being these teenagers with powers and how they're going to deal with school and it's almost taking a Spider-Man approach
That
to
is
it.
cool.
It's really weird.
I like that. That more
Yeah.
realism. My theory, however, is that Bryan Cranston, excellently casted as Zordon, will
saw that.
appear in the film not as a head in a jar originally, but they're gonna use the Cran Man, and they're gonna have him actually appearing as Zordon in the flesh. And my prediction is at the end of the film, we will see maybe the team is victorious, but Zordon loses his body or life or somehow, and that's how he ends up trapped in his little tube.
It's possible, but there was some concept art for Power Rangers that showed Zordon in a tube, but he was just a full body, hanging in the tube.
Really? Yeah, because again,
so I'm not sure if that's the direction
can't
they
imagine
went,
them wanting to waste Bryan Cranston.
He's a good head. I mean, if all we get is the head, I don't think that's horrible.
Well, I could see more for that. And speaking of we've got more for this book in store. And before we really delve into it, we should talk a little bit about the cover and the backs, as we usually do. And this is not a bad-looking cover, to be honest with you. The clothes, again, are a little dated on Jake, but the tiger transformation sequence doesn't look bad. So that's...
I'm just noticing this now. Do they make the color of the logo and everything else based on what the kid model was wearing that day?
That could just be in this cover. I don't think so. I'm looking at the cover of the next book we're reading, and that is not the case. So I don't think so.
I don't know. I'm looking at the cover of The Solution, and Rachel's in a mustard yellow shirt, and the title is yellow.
Well,
so.
Maybe sometimes they go for it, but anyway, besides the cover, the inside cover is one of the cooler ones that we actually have gotten to see so far, because it's another scene from the book, and it's pretty sweet. It's the whole team up against a Howler in their battle morphs, and you get to see the weird Lego Dr. Seuss inspired world of the escort.
It's cool that they did a scene. It's cool that they did a scene from the book. I think there's some design choices in this book that make it less cool for me.
Well, and you got to remember, this is from the 90s when stuff like that was considered futuristic. But I believe what they were really going for is just very alien and very bizarre. And today we'd have a kind of a different view of that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I bet the guy who photoshopped this went on to create the hugely popular K'NEX toy for children.
I don't know about that.
Very much like that. Or something. I'm not sure. It's a little... I think maybe if I was high, I would really enjoy that cover.
I can tell you, man, it doesn't improve it that much. But on the other hand, we had discussed this prior about how the idea was there, the vision was there. It's just the actual translation, the description of it, not so much. Right?
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Exactly. If you don't have anything else to say about it, I would love to have Nate read us the back of the book.
All right. I think I can handle that. I mean, we'll see here. Okay, here we go. The Animorphs have met the Elemist, He helped to save the kids when they were about to be eaten by a Taxon. He helped, with a quote, to free 2 Hork-Bajir and restored Tobias's morphing ability. But, even though the Elemist has enormous power, he is not all-powerful. He has an enemy, the Kryak. So, the Kryak and the Elemist decide that a battle will prove their ultimate power. But they don't intend to fight each other. The Elemist will choose the Animorphs, Axe and Eric, the Chi. The Kryak will choose his own army. But if the Animorphs lose, they will be erased from the universe altogether. And there'll be no one left to fight the Yeerks.
Bum, bum, bum.
Dot.
So right off the bat, yeah, this sounds as though it would be a very big book. And, you know, we had you read the first book where everything kind of goes down in the plot and the characters are established. And then we had you jump to this book, which, like you said, a lot of stuff is different. They are now a fully formidable team. They've had a lot of practice, a lot of experience, a lot of dying, and a lot of mess ups so far to get them to this point. So a lot of the problems that they have in battle in this book come from this overconfidence of what they've learned thus far. And from the back, it sounds just epic.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in the book, we talked about this around book 17 or 18. They know what they're doing now. They're very good at fighting and fighting strategically, guerrilla warfare. Not even counting Marco, and it's just they're very, very good at what they do now, and they go up against a force that
is even better,
is militarily way above them.
Designed bioengineered to be the perfect fighters.
This is like 100%. This is like it is 1742. You have a British militia going up against a set of redcoats. Yes, you fought some battles. You're really good. Now go up against something that knows what it's doing and it was made like that from the start.
Exactly. Quick to point out that the cover quote on this one was "Change is necessary," where again it feels like they're pulling from a stock list of these cover quotes.
I don't know. This one makes sense though, being the last one written by K. Applegate, and they're about to switch to ghostwriters.
I suppose. Yeah, that does make sense.
So
although the last book was the first ghostwritten one.
Yeah, but now they're they got past that last book and they're like, oh my gosh, we got a break. This was amazing. Just ghostwrite the rest of them.
Probably. However, this one works out, and a lot of those ghostwritten ones are actually some of my favorites. So I'm not going to harp on them too much.
Yeah. But jumping into this book, I mean, we can all agree that this is basically Animorphs: The Hunger Games, right?
That's actually what I
essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and this was written a good bit deal.
Actually, more accurately, I'd like to say it's the Animorphs Battle Royale.
Yes, there you go. If you want to do that,
I do want to
start that war. If you're one of those people,
I'd prefer to watch that too.
Nothing can be written under the same premise as something else.
Not even. I just
different.
prefer one over the other. That is all I'm saying.
Yeah. No, yeah. Anyway, well, everybody does. That's not even up for discussion. But anyway, this book does start out pretty interesting, though. It's not just a complete rehash of all the plots so far. It seems like this was a swan song for them.
Well, no, it's special because it's actually a prologue chapter where we get this prologue dream recap of the whole Kryak foreshadowing, because everybody had forgotten about it at this point, pretty much. Because
it was like book 11.
No, it was like 5. It was the second Jake book, because it was the capture, the one where he actually gets infested by a Yeerk, and Nate. That's a great one. That's one. That's the next one I'd pawn off on you if I could.
That's book 6 is the one that he gets
6?
captured.
Yeah, 6.
Yeah,
it's the capture.
It's called The Captured.
Oh, very cryptic.
But yeah. So they're playing the long game, setting up this plot. I don't know if they forgot about it and came back, or
and the prologue does a good job of reminding you that this is a vision that Jake saw when the Yeerk in his head was actually finally dying and leaving him, as they all get this weird image of Kryak, and because of this, Kryak knows about them, knows where they are. He's watching them, essentially, and it terrifies the living bejesus out of Jake, as it should.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I like how, you could very easily be like, well, why are these two god forces, like focusing on these one set of humans and everything? But it explains it a little bit. It goes into the fact that Jake specifically and the rest of the Animorphs are messing with things in such a way that they're causing ripples throughout the whole war. And, they're hurting the Yeerks not only on just, little battle by battle basis, but they're hurting their ego and how they think of themselves. And they're helping turn Yeerks and free Hork-Bajir and like major things that could, like they go into further in this book, if the Yeerks even interact with this other race, it completely changes their perception on how they do war and what they should do with their lives and their goals. The Animorphs are that at a smaller scale for the rest of the universe, and that's why Krayak and why the Elemis takes notice of them and starts trying to affect their lives, because they're butterflying effect the entire universe.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, and all the numerous side adventures that they've had whenever they've been whisked off of Earth. They've interfered with a lot of other species at this point as well.
Yeah.
Let's not forget the psychic frog people.
Yeah, Lyrons.
Exactly, Lyrons. But however, jumping right into this book, after we get this nice recap, which I'm sure was absolutely necessary for you, Nate, right?
Yeah, and actually, it seemed very smooth for me. Like, I'm like, okay, here's Krayak, and then we just kind of move on with the story. Jake references it in his dreams. I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool.
Right, and
so
you had the
I didn't
back
feel
of
like
the
I
book
missed
to
anything.
explain it.
True.
You had the back of the book to explain it.
I didn't actually read the back of the book until I read it just now.
Oh, well, dude, we could have given you some practice rounds.
Oh, that's fine. I'm a big boy. I can do it.
I do think it's interesting, the evolution of talking about Krayak and the Elemis, where the Elemis, they start out saying the Elemis is part of this race of Elemis, and there's like hundreds and thousands of them probably running around messing with the universe. And in this book, they bring that into question. They're like, we don't even know if he's like more than one person or one. And then Krayak's kind of the same way, where they kind of introduce him in this book, and they call him the Krayak, when later they just call him Krayak.
Yeah, they're still not entirely sure what they're doing with these characters, but again, we get it all fleshed out for good in the Elemist Chronicles, which is the second to the last book in the series.
Which is great, because it's so interesting now that, Elemis Chronicles was one of my favorite books of all time for a long time. I mean, it's basically the life and times of God. Like, how did God come into existence?
It's an excellent book.
It's so incredible, and I like now reading all these other books. Like, I never read the 26 before, the Attack before, and it's interesting how things they bring up in this book, things they question about the Elemist, how they described him at the beginning of the series, they basically pay homage to that in the Elemis Chronicles by saying, well, yes, he is one person, but he actually at one point in the universe was hundreds of people all with the same mind. It's almost like when people talk about like God and Jesus.
Yeah, he's
and
like
the
a
Holy Spirit,
hive mind
Trinity
thing. Yeah,
exactly. And it's just it's interesting that they take all that into account.
Did you get this like God imagery from Elemist? I'm sure.
Are you talking to Nate or are you talking to me?
I didn't think I had to specify there.
I didn't think so either, but no one talked.
It was Nate.
Well, okay, so I thought you were talking to Coleman because you guys were talking about the Elemist Chronicles, and I thought maybe there was
no
detail there.
I wanted to know if you thought the Elemist was pretty representative of a God figure.
Yeah, I think so. I didn't have like your classic God image, like giant person in the sky or anything, because it talks about how he takes human form, and then just kind of disappears.
There's some stories about the Lord doing that at one point as well.
Okay, I don't know.
I believe there was some loose collection of stories that were printed at one point. Yeah,
what they call it, the New Testament. There it is.
I've heard of that. I've heard of that.
Yeah. Anyway,
but I didn't have this like
the passion of the Elemis.
I didn't have this vision of like an all-powerful being. I had the way I read it, my interpretation was an all-powerful being that had taken human form as to be most relatable to the characters he was interacting with. He or she.
Well, and he even appears, I believe, at some point in this book in his like Elemisty form, which is kind of humanish. It's actually pictured on the cover
It's
of
like
the
an
Elemist
old man
Chronicles.
elf.
Yeah, it's like an old man elf sort of.
Okay.
He has that form that's the official artwork of him. We don't actually ever get any official artwork of Krayak, but there's some pretty good online imagery that sets it up, I think.
Well, the Animorphs Chronicles describes him best. Like, he
Yeah.
has a form at some point in the Animorphs Chronicles that's almost
It's basically
like,
the
even
size
after
of a
he does-
planet, like a
Yeah, even after
mechanical
he
planet.
doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't need that form eventually, but he still like represents himself as that. But like a planet with like machinery and people living on top of him, and he's one big eye. It's like biomechanical. I pictured like something H.R. Giger would have like drawn.
Sure, yeah,
something
yeah,
crazy.
exactly. Very steampunky. I'm
So
sure.
I actually, because they kept referencing Krayak's eye, and so what I kept thinking
The Eye of Mordor.
yeah, I kept thinking of Sauron.
Yeah.
And now that he's as big of a planet, I'm like combining that with the planet thing in the Fifth Element, and they're like one thing. So it's just a big like Sauron eye floating through space.
No, what's
That
the?
wouldn't be the first
oh my
Fifth
gosh.
Element comparison we've made on this podcast.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure.
Do we have any fans of the 1980s Transformers movie in the house? Anyone?
Not me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Nate, you with
I
me at
missed
all?
that one.
Okay, well there was a giant planet-sized Transformer.
Oh, I know
in
about
that,
that
one, I
though.
was
Is that
gonna say.
Unicron?
Yeah, Unicron.
Yeah, I know about
Unicron.
that.
I was
See,
thinking.
I'm tight. I'm old school. I know.
Yes.
Well, barring those descriptions, this book actually opens right up with the whole Animorphs team on this field trip to this like janky stage production of The Lion King, and while they're just there hanging out, making fun of the show, time stops, and whenever that happens, and Tobias and Axe are like whisked into the room, you know what's up. Everybody knows what's up. The back of the book told us what's up. The Elemist is there.
Yeah, and they don't even question it this time. They're just like, and it's not. They're not at a performance. It's at their gym. It's like a.
School.
Oh my gosh, what are they called? What are they called? At school when they brought
School
everybody
production.
into the gym.
Assembly.
An assembly.
No,
Assembly.
Assembly.
did
Oh
it.
my gosh, yeah, an assembly. It's like an assembly where they brought in those people to like, I don't know, cheer everybody up, or I don't know what their purpose was, but
Either way, they are enjoying taking this time to rest from the last book, where it was definitely a huge ordeal, survival for them, and I'm sure a little production like this is well warranted. But unfortunately, yeah, the Elemist has other plans for them.
But yeah, I do like how they don't question that's the Animorphs. Like they're not even surprised. They're like, okay, he's here. Let's wait and see what form he brings up. You know, like they're just waiting for him and just kind of like
Oh, they're
collecting each
sick
other.
of him at this point.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I kind of got the impression that like when he shows up, it's like, okay, what do you want now?
Yeah, basically, because
and when he. Okay.
oh well, when he demonstrates his powers, and you get the image that he's pretty all powerful. So they know that, you know, he's not the kind of guy that you can say no to, even though he tells them they can always say no. They always have a choice, even though they tend to choose what he wants them to choose.
Well, I thought this was interesting when he poses this choice to them, you know, come help fight on this planet and it'll help the war. He doesn't say it'll win the war. He doesn't give them the usual, like, big choice. This is something that, hey, if you guys want to help me out with this, this'll actually hurt the Yeerks.
Oh, yeah, in a
And
major way.
I think of all the choices they make with the Animorphs, this one was kind of, hey, are you guys up for this?
Well,
you know?
and the thing is, the choice that they make doesn't necessarily even help them, like you said, but it will help the rest of the universe way, 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 way later on in time.
If there's anything
Yeah.
left. Whew.
Ooh.
Oh boy.
Wouldn't it be horrible if the Yeerks took over the whole universe, then they get to that planet, and they're like, oh, we didn't have to.
There was another way all along.
Oh, well.
Yeah. The thing that's different, though, about this Elemist appearance is that instead of just appearing and being, very vague like he normally is, we get a lot more of his backstory than has generally been given up to this point. Mm-hmm. And he even goes into the setup of explaining about Krayak and, how he's his arch nemesis and everything, and poses to them that he and Krayak, instead of battling throughout the universe and just wrecking a shit ton of galaxies, they decided to just play games to kind of take it easy. So their games instead pit, aliens against each other to decide who's going to live and die. So
God help us if either of them gets mad and flips the
yeah,
board.
right. So essentially the setup here is that the LMS team consists of the Animorphs and Eric, and the Krayax team is these 7 Howlers. And it's going to be fighting for the fate of this alien race, who they know as the Escort. And yeah, you mentioned that the descriptions are pretty awful in this book, but I feel like we should read them anyway, just so the viewers or the listeners know.
Well, presumably the listeners have read this book.
But it bears mentioning that they were not the most frightening-looking race we'd ever encountered, but they were definitely not even slightly human. They had heads like vultures thrust forward on long necks. The necks protruded from the shoulders that were sort of an oval platform, flat across. From the shoulders dropped 2 arms, one on each side, each arm jointed 3 times, ending in a hand made up of 1 very long tentacle-like finger and 2 smaller hooked, sharp claw fingers. They walked in a way that made it seem like they were crawling on their knees, backward, but they went forward still. They had 2 thick legs, maybe 2.5 feet long. Then came what looked like knees, followed by calves that extended forward, lying flat on the ground. Those ended in feet, each with a single, long, reprehensible toe and 2 smaller claws jutting from the sides. So basically, and they make this horrible gasping noise. They're the most annoying, ugly creatures that you could think of, really.
See, in my best and worst quality when reading is, and I've talked about this earlier on the show, when I don't like an image that's put in my head by a book,
change it.
I put my own.
Yeah.
I do that too.
I change it. I saw these creatures as short and pudgy and fat.
Yep.
And just like knocking into each other, running around, and like wheezing like Peter Pettigrew and Harry Potter.
Sure,
you know,
yeah,
like that kind of like runty little ratty kind of guy, and just running around. So it made it easier for me.
I actually did the same thing, and I do that when I read. Although my image was a little more Tonberry-esque from Final Fantasy.
Sure.
Oh, nice.
So still short, still kind of stocky, I guess, but
Robes.
Yeah.
There's a particular type of slime enemy from the Dragon Warrior or Dragon Quest series of games that I have in my mental image for these guys too.
Animorphs headcanon.
Exactly. So yeah, they're meant to look pretty bizarre.
I also made the Howlers way scarier in my head than stupid-looking lava creature things.
Oh yeah, you
I did
actually
that
do
too.
get a good look at one of the Howlers on the inside cover panel, and it's basically as described. I mean, they got the lava-y skin and the claws. They're kind of like lava Wolverines, the X-Men.
Well, see, I pictured like the Predator with like cooled lava skin, like
The black? Yeah.
and rocky
That'd be
skin. Yeah, like something like that.
So
And the weird baby
okay.
blue eyes. It's just weird.
Well, that to me kind of sounds like they'd be like dead eyes. What I was imagining was I don't know if you guys played much World of Warcraft, but I thought of the werewolves from World of Warcraft, but not with like nice fur kind of on their body, more that hardened, cracked skin, black of course.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the image I came up with.
Not that beautiful rustic fur.
No,
they have.
absolutely not.
The manicured, brushed, pressed fur. Right.
It's a race of metrosexuals in that game, I'm just telling you.
So, Alamest proposes, this game. This is the thing that I've come to you with this time. And like he does, he likes to give them the choice. So we get a nice little chapter of them later going back to their normal lives once time is resumed and talking about their situation and what they want to do about it. And of course, as we all know, they're going to choose to end up going to help them.
Yeah, and this is a big decision by them because, again, like they could very easily die, and like you said earlier, Mitch, they're way more confident on their skills. So they're like, yes, if this will hurt the Yeerks, we're all for it. Blast us off. Let's go to this planet. And just from their interactions later in the book, you can tell that at this moment they thought they were going to save this peaceful race of nice aliens who they could relate to, and it's not the case.
Expectations were not at all met as soon as, everybody basically agrees on it one by one, and Eric is, of course, their other teammate, even though they don't realize it at the moment. And as soon as they're all in, they're teleported instantly to the Escort homeworld. And right away, they bump into these creatures who are extremely obnoxious. They're like Marco says, it's a planet of salesmen because they're all wandering around trying to buy and barter things from the team. And they want the strangest things like body parts, hair, and most of all, memories, which is a big, big plot point of this book, is the buying and selling and just transferring of memories.
I feel like I can't help but see this book in the eyes of two authors who are like out of ideas but love the series and like are ready to give it up. And then they write the story of this race of creatures who are just money grabbing and just want to buy and sell your memories. And I don't know, it just seemed like they were talking about themselves a little bit.
I never even thought of that. I will say, though, that this buying and selling of memories intrigues me a lot, to the point of where I almost expect that is where entertainment in the future will go if our technology ever catches up to it, to be able to record things like memories from inside your brain. Because if you think about it, movies and entertainment TVs, they're really just people's experiences, people's stories. If you could witness those from the viewpoint of, say, a really interesting, fascinating person who's lived an interesting life, their memories would play like a really good movie with some editing.
Well, no, but see, we're already doing that. It's called YouTube.
Sure.
I mean, it's like movies and TV shows we're being told premise. Stories. But, I mean, I love watching, like, Fail Army, just watching someone ride a bike and just eat face, just completely knock over or accidentally go into traffic.
Yeah, those are our
like
YouTube videos, is other people's painful memories. Which is
exactly
what this alien race deals in. And it's, I don't know, I like it. It's clever.
This alien race inspired World Star hip hop.
Oh my God, yeah.
So
I don't know what that is.
It's I don't know what it is either.
It's like an urban culture platform for entertainment, I guess.
Videos,
yeah, videos.
For videos, and a lot of them are people fighting.
Oh, okay.
Like in a schoolyard fight or something, or rednecks in a trailer park.
Yes. So
if you ever see a video of someone fighting and someone yells out "World Star," that's what they're referencing.
I will be watching for that in any video I watch now, like forever.
Cute cat falls off the couch. World Star.
Right. Well, as soon as they're on this planet and they figure out, what these escort aliens are really like and what they're after, they come up with a good idea to buy this guide escort to kind of show them around. And they do this by selling some of Rachel's hair, which she's none too pleased about, but it works out pretty well for the team, especially considering that they initially wanted way more like body parts and organs and whatnot.
I totally picture that, like, it's been done in a bunch of movies where, like, the cute character, like, gets their hair, like, cut off or blown off by some explosion, and they're, like, even cuter afterwards with a short haircut.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Rachel cuts her hair finally, and it actually looks good.
But, this whole buying and selling thing, it's crazy to me that the Animorphs, there's almost breaking character a few times. No matter how annoyed with them they are, honestly, in this book, they really sit and talk about whether they should actually save them or not because they're annoying.
Yeah, totally.
I mean,
it shows very plainly that the fact that they're dealing with the escort and finding out what who they are, plays into the story because they're so annoyed, especially after their first loss against the Howlers, that they see them as really not worth the hassle, not worth risking their lives.
I understand it. It's not actually breaking character because it's them confronting the fact that they're not invincible and that they might actually die for this incredibly annoying race.
Yes.
So I actually really kind of appreciated that part because it really humanizes all of the characters. Not that they're not human, but it makes them more relatable, and you get this impression that they're not perfect. Now, granted, I haven't read the other books, so this is just my third book. But I kind of get the impression like, oh, everything kind of works out all the time. And with that particular part of this story, you get this feeling like they're scared. They are questioning their decision to try and save this race of, and everyone that seems to be part of the party, this just awful race that doesn't really I guess, provide much. They're just money grabbing.
And they are just kids.
Yeah, true. Yep,
Yeah, making
absolutely.
this decision. So they're acting like kids. They're acting like
and that's
selfish
actually
kids.
one thought
And
I thought of was that like they're trying to balance growing up with kind of more childish thoughts of like, oh, this is dumb. I don't want to do this. To your point.
Right, yeah.
yeah. And I mean, you got to think too. Now Nate doesn't know this, but he's right. Like he says, everything feels like they just win all the time at the beginning of this book, and that this is showing their humanity. They have been winning lately, and they've done some really big, hurtful things to the Yeerks in the war, and that's why they're so high at the beginning of this book. But I mean, Nate, if you went back and read book 2 through 25. Those books are literally them failing all the time, like constantly.
Yeah, it's true.
There's entire books that are not like, okay, we're going to have a mission at the beginning of the book. We're going to go do that mission. Oh, we failed miserably. We didn't come close to coming anywhere close to finishing this mission. And, oh, we're about to die now. And it was all for nothing.
Or,
like, those are multiple books.
Or there are books like number 17, The Warning, that stands out in my mind, where they confront Visor 3's twin brother. Ooh. Where it ends so open-endedly. Remember how it ended with them not necessarily winning, not necessarily losing, just getting out with their lives, but they ended in a very questionable situation where it's like, well, did Jake go back and like finish the mission and kill the dude? Or, what happened?
Yeah, they never answer whether he went back and murdered someone or not.
Basically, which I think we know from the future books he didn't. But
or did he?
Anyway, the next part of this book, after it's done a very good job of setting them up as not too unconfident about what they're going into. The guide takes them to this mall-like area where they encounter these subspecies of the escort called the Warmaker escort, and they have a little bit tougher description, but we won't go into that. And they throw them for a loop for a little bit, but they're able to easily kind of handle these guys, and I think that only helps to build their overconfidence a little, because as soon as the first Howler is spotted by Eric, who is so noticeably freaked out about it that his hologram is even glitching, they enter into this battle that they're definitely not ready for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, man. I'm playing Pokemon Go over here. I don't have a witty comeback.
My startup disk is almost full, so I was trying to desperately delete things so it didn't stop me recording.
Oh, holy crap, dude. Well, handle that, and I'll keep talking.
Exactly. So now you see, yeah, absolutely, why that was my answer.
Well, absolutely. They're into this fight unprepared and overconfident, and Eric's not even able to warn them about the Howler's main howling ability, which is like, so important. I don't know how he couldn't have thrown that in, and that's the problem. Kind of with the plot of this book, I suppose, is that Eric holds back information from them that would be extremely vital, and it's kind of glossed over as a plot point, but he definitely could have given them a little bit more warning about this, especially since the Howlers just use this ability and completely overpower the team, and they get their asses handed to them. Were you expecting that, Nate?
Well, no, I guess.
No, you thought they'd be able to handle at least one?
I don't know. I thought it was too early in the story to really have kind of a big victory. So I kind of thought it would be more of them figuring out how the Howlers work, and then they would come back and have a massive victory later.
Sure,
I'll
it's like
hold
an
my further
introduction.
comments till later in the recap.
Sure. Well, yeah, this is a very good introduction because it's just one of them, and it does demonstrate their main ability, and you get to see the team really go into panic mode as, Jake's desperately trying to order everybody into their morphs, and we've got Axe, who is freaking out because he has to run away once this Howler's defense or offense, whatever you want to call it, happens, and it's just really not a good time for everybody. They're completely and utterly decimated by just this one enemy. And in fact, the battle kind of cuts off with Jake in a bad state. and the next chapter he just wakes up somewhere else. And we've got the rest of the team telling him about how they had to get out of there. The only way that they survived was because of Eric and his infinitely important hologram technology, which it seems a little overpowered at this point.
Pretty much. And then this is plain for some reason.
Yeah, well, this chapter is really nice because we get to see the team in their, lowest moment of defeat here, where they realize what they're truly up against. And once again, they're talking about if they can really win, if it's worth it, if the escort are worth saving, and ultimately they decide that they just need more information, which is totally true. And they ask Eric for more, and he's not able to give them any more, but Guide is able to provide them by, once again, selling and bartering some of their body fluids or whatever away. They're able to come across some Howler memories, which...
Yeah, his exchange with them is hilarious, because he's getting richer and richer throughout this entire book just by getting them to give up more and more of their memories and do a big trade for the end.
Right, yeah, they're constantly building up Guide to be in a really good position on his homeworld, and he's one of the better, more grounded characters of the story, and just a good addition overall. Something to give us a little bit of entertainment or likability from this escort.
It's the same way. It's the same reason that Bill Gates got so rich on our planet. It's interaction with aliens.
Sure, if you subscribe to crazy theories.
That's one theory.
I thought everybody believed the same thing, but I guess
Thoughtspeak is just going to devolve into a crackpot theory discussion on aliens every episode.
I'm okay with that. But yeah, moving on from here. It's just the way this whole plot goes out with them fighting the Howlers and using the escort eventually as cover. It's a different tone for Animorphs in general, because they've had fights, they've had missions, all that. But this whole book is based on the structure of a game between the 7 and 7 chosen by either side. It makes it a very refreshing viewpoint from two authors who said they were out of ideas at this point in the series. I thought the structure of the book and everything was really different.
Yeah, it's definitely it's more mission based than some of these books tend to be, because they're pretty much tossed right into the main thing right away. But yeah, they end up learning a lot about the Howlers through these visions that Eric can show them with their holograms. And they basically learn that they've never been defeated, and that they were specifically created by Krayak just to be murder machines. They kill everything they come across. I think Eric mentions they've killed 17 different species so far, just on their own.
And what they figure out, I don't know if this is jumping ahead.
I was
go ahead, Nate.
I kind of feel like that's cheating in the Ellimist and Krayak's battle, or not battle, but game. Because Ellimist picked something that already existed, and maybe it's explained that he actually created the Andalites' ability to morph more directly than has been alluded to me. But the Krayak, specifically created the Howlers. What kind of surprises me is that the Ellimist didn't do the exact same thing.
Well, if you think about it, the Ellimist did pretty much create the Animorphs by putting Elfangor in the position that he was in to give them the technology. So
that's true.
Yeah.
You could say everything the Ellimist has done for them in all the books previous to this, including the very beginning with Elfangor, was to have 6 teenagers and Eric, to be in a position to win this game at this point. For the long con. This could be their entire purpose.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's kept them alive. He's helped them, Sure.
He gave Tobias his morphing power back. That happened.
Yeah, but he's stuck as a
and
bird
take it even further. You could take it even further.
That was his choice, by the way.
So Krayak created the Howlers. But this was during a time, if you've read the Ellimist Chronicles, this is during a time where he was creating the Howlers to just wipe out as many species as possible. And the Ellimist created the Pimelites, which is the race that Eric is, the Chi. It was the masters who created them. He created the Pimelites to spread life throughout all the planets. And it's very, very heavily insinuated that Earth was one of those planets that the Pimlites seeded for life. So they both kind of created each other.
Okay. All right, that makes sense.
It's a confusing but awesome backstory.
Technically. Yeah. It's very hearty.
And if these were adapted into episodes, I think 2-part episodes would be perfect for most of these books. I think that would be the logical point for the ending of the first episode. That or them losing the battle, right after losing the battle.
Yeah.
Because now the scene kind of shifts to the next morning. They've managed to get a kind of a not peaceful night of sleep, but cuts right in with the Howlers coming after them. And Jake is kind of freaking out because he wasn't expecting it so soon and ordering everybody to just try and focus on escaping by morphing fly. And, we've got Axe trying to be a hero and prove himself from that last encounter where he ran away. And he's not backing down. He's waiting for the Howler who's right on him. But he does eventually
I will
listen.
honestly say... Honestly, in the last, 10, 15 books, I think this is the most interesting character moment for Axe, is him being the only one really affected by the Howler's scream at that time and running away. And then in the whole rest of the book, he's just flat out reckless, trying to prove that he's brave. I thought that was a good turn for him.
Well, yeah, we definitely needed a little bit more of Axe. And, I'm sorry that, Nate, you didn't get to see him in that first book. He doesn't come in until a couple books later. When they actually rescue him from his crashed spaceship on Earth. But yeah, Axe is shown to be this very honor-driven kind of alien who's got, this creed that he lives by where Andalites
Think
are...
like ancient samurai.
Yeah,
samurai.
exactly. Like a centaur samurai. And it's a big deal for him to be defeated, and not only just defeated, but to run away. Oh boy, that's no good. I mean, you got the idea of what Andalites are like from the Andalite Chronicles, so you know a little bit about their species.
I keep forgetting he read that because he hasn't read a lot of the series, and it's weird that we made him read like one of the backstory prequel side books.
Well, that's why we did it, so he would have this like overall arcing knowledge of some things in the story.
Yeah, and I think that actually has helped me a lot. Like when I first started reading The Invasion in the last couple months here, I actually
it picks up. Sorry, you just talk.
Oh, okay. So I actually because I think I read Andalite Chronicles. It's probably roughly this time last year that we recorded. Maybe it was, I don't know. I don't remember. But things had gotten kind of fuzzy over time. But it was helpful to refresh it, and I actually thought, like, how did that? I thought, like, I don't know. I remember the crash scene differently. My memory's awful, so I'll chalk
because
it up
you
to
get
me
it
just
from
like
the perspective of
misremembering.
Elfangor. You have had it from the
Right.
perspective of Elfangor. The beginning of that first book was there at the end of Andalite Chronicles,
Yeah,
just
and I
from
remember
different characters' perspective.
Yep, and I remember that. What I remember from the Andalite Chronicles was like the ship was like crashing and like the alerts were going off and like it was just chaos. And then like he crashes at the construction site, but reading the attack, that doesn't seem to be quite how it happened. It was more of the ship kind of landed on its own, and then it was just there. There wasn't necessarily a crash per se.
Yeah, so to speak. I mean, the main details are there that the Elfangor ship did end up in a construction site, and the Yeerks were right after him. Now that we're discussing the very beginning of the series, how do we jump back into this?
It's hard for me because I haven't none of the podcasts I've recorded in like the last 3 months have been story driven.
Yeah, oh, sure.
Like where we follow a story beat for beat. We just talk about it overall. So everything I'm adding is just like, well, I think Axe's character arc in this one is great. you're trying to keep up with plot points.
No, yeah, and I mean that's why I want to just make sure we discuss everything the book has to offer. And we're right in the middle of them, encountering the Howlers once again, and just barely managing to make it out. And that's kind of a recurring thing now, is they're just working on trying to survive and stay alive. And they managed to get Eric and Guide out of there with their hologram trickery again. just an important plot point to mention. At this point, they still think that the Howlers are just murder machines that are going to kill, anything in their path. So they think they're very not safe there. And this is when Guy decides to take them to the place called a servant guild, because there's all these different sects of the escort. Which was another kind of cool thing I thought about their species, how they divide off into these little kind of clubs that they have.
Yeah, but it actually affects their biology as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So their hosts would develop in different ways, I guess, and that's how they came up with the Warmaker escort as well. But they end up in this place where they're confronted with this information that the escort are actually highly evolved Yeerks that basically went about creating their own host bodies and just sort of evolved together into this one perfect symbiotic species. And they're very, very torn up about that at first.
Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly, they're not like the Yeerks in an evolved stance. They're just another parasitic species that is extremely reminiscent of the Yeerks, especially since they started out as aggressively parasitic, like the Yeerks, where they would take a host and take control, and they just learned a new way. They learned a different way to become symbiotic, and then they truly became symbiotic. That was the thing that Animorphs couldn't wrap their heads around at first, was that it's no longer a host and a parasite. It's two species that literally can't live without the other.
Exactly, and that's what makes it kind of okay.
And I actually thought that was an interesting thing to introduce because, as we mentioned earlier, these are kids. So it makes sense that their gut instinct is to immediately hate what the York did. But then as the story progresses, it makes more and more sense, and they I think they grow a little and when they're able to understand that it is a symbiotic relationship.
Sure, and I mean it really does go against kind of what they've been battling and combating this whole series. But in the end, I think we find that it really makes sense for their overall cause. This is kind of one of the better fights that they can be fighting in the long run of just everything in the universe, not just what happens on their fight on Earth.
And it's very hard for humans, and especially children, to get on board with the idea of that, hey, what you're doing isn't causing and affecting during your lifetime.
Kids cannot plan for the future. Trust me, I work
they can't plan
them.
for their own future.
Yeah,
very much if it doesn't affect me, why do I care type mindset.
Yeah, but I mean, this is probably one of the more important things they've ever done in the series. Even winning back their own planet, who knows how big an effect that actually ended up having on the Yeerks. We know that it had a big effect, but I'm saying even if they were just a random planet that was being attacked by the Yeerks, they might get their planet back, and then hurrah, the Yeerks go on to invade the universe anyway. But this is something that really would set back the Yeerks if they found out about.
Exactly, and it really does. It will. I think it will. But the book then jumps to the team once again facing the Howlers, and this is where they're coming for them, and their strategy at this point is still to just run. Because at this point they conveniently learned that the Howlers can't shoot the escort in the way. It's like rules of engagement or something. And in this ensuing battle, I mean, Cassie almost dies, and I'm led to believe so does Marco. It's very chaotic in this encounter.
Yeah, they get close. And did they ever say anything about? I mean, the Animorphs were never told that they couldn't hurt the escort.
No, but they're there to save them specifically. So why would they want to hurt them?
I mean, if it beats the Howlers, start throwing them off of bridges.
Sure, yeah, use them like oversized squeaky toys and just throw them at them.
Well, they effectively do use them as shields. I mean, they're hiding in crowds of them. At least once they figure out that they can't be shot at.
Right, it plays into their final plan once they really realize what they're dealing with. They actively make shielding themselves with the civilians part of the plan, which if they were doing on Earth would be way more messed up. But
it'd be a little horrific.
For some reason, it works out well here because they are an effective shield because they can't be hurt by their enemies. That's why.
But This whole thing with the escort, I mean, I thought it was clever how they were used and all the guilds and their culture. You just take a step back from the book as two writers making this all up. Yes, they have a base concept that's been used pretty often. You know, it's like a Hunger Games or Battle Royale or whatever. But the idea that this race in the middle of it, I think another author would just make that some generic race, not really care much about them, what they are, what they do. But it's actually integral to the story, their culture and the different levels of their culture and individuals at different levels of that culture. It's incredibly important to how the story plays out. So I thought that was, I mean, this just shows that I know this is a kid series. I know this is, you know, it's Animorphs, whatever. But I think these authors, as we've gone on to see them win awards and be these huge authors, that they started here. I mean, this is kind of why we started doing Thoughtspeak to begin with, is that these authors were ahead of their time, and the first thing they happened to be writing was this book series about kids turning into animals fighting aliens, you know?
And it works out so well, at least I think. But in this big bloody battle, which, by the way, besides the situation in the first book, which wasn't so gory or bloody as it is just disturbing, what did you think of all the violence in this particular book, Nate?
I liked it because it seemed chaotic, and I think that's exactly what this type of engagement would have been. I think it would have been extremely chaotic, because the kids are faced against these these basically like bioengineered warriors, and I don't know. It seems like there'd be a lot of running, and they'd try a couple things that would fail, and that's exactly what happened. So I actually really liked the way that all went down.
Well, good, because this is not the first huge bloody battle where, you know, main characters are almost dying and having to morph out just in time. We've seen it before, but, I mean, it's always brutal to imagine. And in this encounter, Falcon Jake manages to push a howler off of a ledge and then acquire it as they're falling and remorph just in time. Again, we've seen that scenario a time or two in this book where somebody's falling and has to remorph in time. But, you know, the cool thing about it is that he managed to acquire another creature while doing that.
Yeah, and that he planned for that. I mean, he jumped off so he could rush down and acquire it, you know, as fast as he could and then get back up because he knew that would be important.
Well, yeah, and it really turns the tide of the battle.
Yeah, I mean, Jake is making some big decisions in this book.
Oh, definitely. And as soon as he's, you know, back in the sky and meets up with Tobias, learns that everybody somehow managed to escape once again, and due to Eric's holograms coming in and playing a big part. Mostly they just managed to hide the team for long enough to get out of their bad situations. Well, a huge moment in this series finally comes when Jake returns to the team, and he and Cassie share their first, you know, on-screen, on-book kiss, and it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big build-up for the series. Obviously, they've been playing coy with each other and rushing over to each other whenever they're about to die, like over and over again. But somebody always turns away with a half smile or an embarrassed look or something like that.
Well, it's been hinted at and implied thus far, but this is the first real big. You know, it's out there now, and Rachel even says it's about time.
I don't think the authors could leave the book series if they thought this might be the last one they write. I don't think they could leave without finishing that off at least.
Exactly.
Having read just the one other book with these characters, so this is book 2 for me, and my thought also was like, geez, come on, just make out already. So it was nice that it happened. Good for them.
You didn't have to slug through 23 books of build up
of them staring at each other and casting off side glances. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so I guess my biggest question for you, Nate, specifically, is that you read the first book, which gets wacky. Mm-hmm. Wacky in the sense that aliens come down and attack these kids and they have morphin powers and all that. Do you feel like just going to this next book that the series escalated? Like, is it unfamiliar from that first book where the series got to this point?
That's a good question. No, I don't think it's unfamiliar. There's some detail I feel like I missed out on. But I can definitely see, knowing that there are other books between the first one and then what we're talking about now, knowing those other books, I can definitely see the progression. There's a few things that I was kind of confused on. Like I made a note of, I think Axe refers to Jake as Prince Jake. I have no idea why. So
it's kind of an ongoing joke with them. Is that so? They rescue this Andalite, and he's an Arist. Mm-hmm. He's a young warrior, so he's like a cadet basically in the army, but he's not a full on warrior yet. And so a thing with them, it's not just the cadets, but the way the Andalite military is structured, you have your commanders, you have your captains or whatever, but you also have princes, which they're not real royalty. They're just like, if a Andalite has done something great in war, or if they've done some huge, it's like a Medal of Honor for them, they become princes, and everybody refers to them in royal terms.
It's like the highest chain of command, and basically every cadet is assigned to a prince. Like that's a big thing in their culture, is they follow these princes into battle. And so him choosing Jake to be his prince, well, because Jake's really the only one around there that can be, he's the leader of the team, is a very big deal for him. I mean, he's allied himself with the team, and Jake is his leader, who he is supposed to take commands from. And as you can see in this book, sometimes it's really challenging for him to do that. There's later books in the series where Axe is very much struggling with whether or not he wants to continue following Jake's lead. And at one point, in one of my favorite books, he basically goes rogue, and and almost a lot of people die from it. Well, a lot of people do.
I mean, Axe always struggles whenever he's like, yes, Jake is his prince. He's chosen to follow him. But if they're in a situation where they meet other Andalites, or they actually come into contact with the Andalite military, I mean, he's pretty torn in those situations. Okay. And he doesn't always make the greatest decisions. But that's why he calls him Prince, and it's a joke, because Jake, every time he calls him Prince, Jake says, "Don't call me Prince."
He's like, "Stop it! Don't call me that."
Yeah.
So, and
exactly.
then just having read this, jumping into this book, I thought, what's the joke here? I don't get it. But that makes a lot of sense.
Well, that same joke has literally been in every other book, basically, where Axe refers to him as Prince Jake, and he says, "Don't call me Prince Jake."
And just to further on my question, it's funny because I feel like the series at this point has gotten, for lack of a better term, like crazier than where it started. I mean, it started pretty crazy, but then when you move to the end of the series, not counting the last like 2 chapters, it actually turns into a much more realistic, like Independence Day scenario.
Yeah, I love it. Yes, I love it when the alien invasion goes, worldwide, and everybody knows, and it's not just the Animorphs in the story fighting the battles. It gets so good.
It becomes a much more straightforward but extremely, extremely clever. Okay, we have to make troop movements. We have to figure this out. We have to sacrifice this.
It becomes more like Ender's Game.
It does. It really does. It's amazing.
And this book is really winding down here in that they know they have got to go up against the Howlers again. They've got a new secret weapon. Jake actually has a Howler morph he can use. And they come up with this plan to defeat the Howlers using memories. Because, again, memories have been really important to this storyline so far. And Jake finally gives Axe a much-needed pep talk to get him to kind of calm down and come back to the side of reason, because they'll need him for this fight. And they end up kicking their plan off by drawing the Howlers in, and after morphing one, Jake learns the truth about them and what they're really like inside their mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know what I was going to say.
Are you okay? You've gotten significantly worse at just picking up without a stop where I leave up.
I'm sorry.
I feel like I should go on and explain the entire plot, but I feel like I should stop to let you interject at points. Am I not letting you interject at good points?
No, you are. I'm having an issue where I've forgotten the smaller beats of this book because I read it so long ago. And then on top of that, I'm waiting to see if Nate will jump in. And then when he didn't, I forgot what I was going to say.
Sorry. I see. Well, we're in the final kind of act of this book. They're in their last battle here. Jake's learned, the Howlers aren't really this kill-happy race of ultra badasses. They're just these like kids that think they're playing a game. So essentially, they're kind of like a parallel of the Animorphs themselves, except they're, Krayak's twisted version of these kids that he just employs to kill things. And
and they also learn the biggest thing that I thought was crazy about this is when they learned that the Howlers, because they are this hive mind, if they had ever gotten wind of the fact that they have not won every game they've played,
well, yeah, that's the thing,
aka destroying out the races, that it would completely score through their whole society and
it ruins
break
them.
their confidence.
And that's important to know too, is that the Howlers have lost before in the past. Who knows how many times they've lost, because Krayak always wipes the memory of them losing from them. So
he wipes them out. He wipes the ones who lost out, so they can't connect back.
Right. That is very much, like you said, him flipping the board because he's lost.
Yeah, and this gives them this gives the Animorphs the first ray of hope of okay, we can't really beat these guys hand-to-hand combat. We're not going to kill them. But we can get the guy who, put the pieces on the board to take the pieces off.
I thought this was
and then we win.
Very clever way to end the story. I actually was expecting kind of a big battle, which I mentioned earlier. But to end it in such I don't want to say anticlimactic way, because I feel like that undervalues the ending of the story, but in such a clever way. They don't actually have to fight them. They just need to project these memories onto them, and I don't know, just it was really interesting to me.
On another level, I mean, it's it's really interesting because they've tried to push, every time the Ellimist has showed up in this book series, they've tried to push the fact that interactions with him are not straightforward. If it's me versus the Yeerks and the Ellimist is involved in what we're doing, it's not just going to be, I just have to beat the Yeerk, or I just have to beat the enemy and then I'll win. Everything with the Ellimist brings in that fourth dimension. And so it really is like taking a little 2D person and pulling him up into a 3D world. It's like, okay, we don't have to just kill the Howlers. We can affect the people playing the game and work on this whole nother level. I mean, it's reminiscent of every time the Ellimist has ever been part of the story, of what they've tried to teach us about how you interact with him.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a good way to sort of finish these characters off, because as soon as they figure out that they're just children playing a game, it makes the idea of them flat out murdering them so much harder to deal with, really. And that's why Jake struggles here at the end of the book, especially when he thinks of the Howler that he killed. But yeah, you get them strapping the memories into this Howler, and the game's just over. Krayak just quits right there on the spot, teleports the whole team to his little home-worldy kind of spooky place, where I imagine it very much like Nate said, Eye of Sauron, like right up there on lava pits or lava fields everywhere, the big eye overlooking them. And that's just
James Horner's music blaring in the background.
Right. It's a terrifying place to be until the Ellimist shows up and, is kind of like, well, we won. Suck it.
Yeah, and it's I love Jake's line to Krayak. Do you have that up anywhere?
I could very easily pull it up, yeah.
Let me see if I can get it.
Krayak's line to Jake? Or Jake's line to Krayak? Or
hold on.
Ellimist's line to Krayak?
Hold on, I'm gonna read this whole page.
Krayak talking to Marco?
No, it's it's Krayak interacting with Jake at the end of the book. I'm just gonna read it. He was huge, no arms were irrelevant to him. He sat on what might have been a throne, or might have been part of him, I couldn't tell. Machine, creature, both, or something that was neither. He turned his single huge blood-red eye and looked down at me. I was on my knees, human again, hard steel beneath me, darkness all around, but I felt a hand touching mine. The others were with me too, cowering beneath the seething evil creature called Krayak. I met his gaze, I closed my eyes, but I could still see him looking at me, as he had watched me mocking in my dreams. We meet at last, face to face, Krayak said, in a low voice that vibrated up through the floor, through the air, a voice so low that it seemed it would shake my very atoms apart. I kept my eyes turned away, though it did no good. I wanted to stand, but I couldn't. I was shaking, my teeth were chattering. What, not so brave now, little Jake, he mocked. Look at you, all of you cowering. Are you frightened? I nodded. Yeah, I am. I admitted in a weak voice, but we won. And then there was a laugh that was as powerful and as awesome dread that flowed from Krayak. The big red eye snapped up away from me. I breathed again. The laughter continued, gathering force, louder and louder, and more delighted. I turned and saw the limist. He was in human guise, looking like a wise old man. No more his true face than Eric's face was true. And then, he just, Limist starts talking about stuff.
But the Krayak kind of turns into a Saturday morning villain here for a little bit because they give him actual dialogue, which I like when they make the LMS, they give him his own font in the beginning of the book, their first encounter with the LMS, when he's just like speaking to them without actually appearing. It's its own separate font. It gives you this idea of a more grand sort of voice. But when you have the dialogue printed as it is here in this last confrontation, it's given to him like dialogue from any other character. So it's kind of underwhelming. I wish they had maybe chosen a bigger, more imposing font for his speech.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool idea. I love when authors mess with like the way the book is written.
Yeah. I'd like to see more untraditional type like that because, like I said, it feels like this encounter is a little bit more with a Saturday morning villain. With the whole team there, you imagine them like on their knees, all holding hands. It would be a very iconic shot for, either a season finale or a new season of this kind of show to set up this grander foe in the scheme of things. I think that's the way I see it in my head. But we've got, the LMS who appears and kind of gives them the wrap up and explains that even though they won and they didn't really do much for themselves, there's a possibility that the Yeerks will encounter the escort later in time and that they'll be better off for it. And that's really the point of everything that he asked them to do. And, it seems like it'd be an entirely important thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's just... I like these open-ended endings that it's like, well, we don't really know if we won yet, but in 400 years, we might.
Sure, it'll definitely be a helpful piece later on.
Yep, and I think they need to have these types of endings for such a series with so many individual stories in it. I don't think there's any way they could have a ton of closure at the end of a single book. And maybe I'm wrong. Again, this is the third one I've read.
No, the series is meant to be. The series is meant to be extremely episodic, especially when you get into some of these more filler books. However, the ending of the series, I will say, has finality to it until it doesn't anymore. And Coleman and most of our listeners know what I'm talking about. But I think if you were to read the end of this book, you would come away feeling like you get a good sense of the end, at least of this situation with the Yeerks invading Earth. Everything after that is kind of up in the air or up in space.
I mean, everybody knows what we're talking about, so it's not spoiling it for anyone. But Nate, basically, at the end of the series,
don't tell them the actual scene, though.
I'm not gonna tell them the scene, but I'm just saying, like, after they've completed wrapped up everything, the Yeerks, everything is finished. That
they
war is done.
They basically start a new saga or start a new story.
New villain.
It's just like a new, like if a manga, like DBZ, if it was winding down and it had a perfect conclusion and ending, and then the artist did like one more chapter that was like, oh, and now I'm setting up a new story arc. But now the series is over.
Yeah, and I'm also going to have my characters like possibly die right then and not tell you.
Exactly. It leaves
insane.
them off in a bit of turmoil that really left the majority of the fan base wanting more and never getting it. And that's a big reason why we're doing this podcast, is because we feel like there will one day hopefully be a continuation of this story that exists in some kind of canon of the series, not the multitudes of fan fiction that exists out there already. And, we would love to help guide the crafting of this sequel series if it ever were to occur. We've got our own ideas, in fact.
So why...
We won't delve into them now, though.
Fair. Why did the story stop?
Oh, at that point, the artists or the authors fully admit they had completely exhausted ideas. They'd wrapped up the story of the Earth invasion. And after 56 books, they were ready to do other things. Okay, and
that's fair.
Yeah, they wanted to write like multiple other series, and like at the same time, and they just couldn't fit Animorphs into that. And I don't know why they didn't want to. I guess because they wanted to wrap it up. They didn't want to continue ghostwriting or they were definitely not happy with a few of the ghostwriters who were writing, and so they didn't want more crap books.
That's fair.
And they couldn't write it themselves, so they just wrapped it up.
Sure. Makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah, and like I said, most of the fan base, either loves the ending, hates the ending, or actually, as we had told Michael Grant in our interview, it's not that the fan base hates the actual ending, they just hate that that's where it ended, and they want more. And I myself, I love the ending. I think it's very fitting. But, we don't need to talk about the end of the series right now. The end of this book was
We bring
fantastic.
up the end of the series like every other episode, so it's not that big of a deal.
That's kind of true. But at the same time, I want to wind down talking about this specific book and give my review on that.
Well, let's go into reviews.
Before we
yeah.
do that, can I? Well, yeah. Let me make one comment quick on the second to last
Okay.
chapter.
Yeah, let's hear it.
And maybe Coleman, I think you maybe started leading into this, or maybe not. But the very last couple lines of chapter 26, where they're talking to Krayak, Jake morphs into the Howler and is basically like scanning through the memories, and none of the memories got through except one with him and Cassie like holding each other and kissing, and I really like what he says to Krayak, and it says, you were too late. Something got through to the Howler's collective memory. Krayak says, what? And he just says love. And then that's how it ends with Krayak. It felt a little cheesy, but at the same time, I really appreciated it. Because I think that's
really that's the one thing the Howlers were missing in
Absolutely.
their
and
existence.
It's such a strong idea that could fundamentally change them. Maybe not that one image alone, but I think that could have the potential to change at least individuals, if not the whole collective race.
Well, I love that the Limus tells them that the next race that the Howlers tried to destroy, they tried to destroy them by kissing them.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's amazing. That's what I get. I get what you're saying. Like, it's very like cheesily executed, but the concept is really clever and good. Yeah.
So that winds it all down, and as we hear from Jake, even though he's back on home, he's happy from their victory, he's feeling a lot more loving and open towards Cassie. Even though he's looking at her, he still is very, very torn apart by his feelings of letting this one Howler die now, which is very, very, I think, symbolic of this entire series. Is even when they have victories, there are massive major defeats that they personally suffer, and it's always represented in like nightmares and like we said, they do later develop very realistic PTSD from all of this.
Yeah, including the end of the series, most of the endings of these books are more bittersweet than anything.
Exactly, because they wanted to really nail home the point that in these wars, even the winners still have great losses and great casualties along the way. And it points out a lot of moral gray areas in fighting these battles. Because when the series started off, it was very much like very idealistic, we are good, the enemies are evil, that is that. And I think the longer they tried to keep this series going, the more they had to paint it realistic.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, can you guys hear that on my end?
I don't hear anything,
I
no.
don't hear anything either.
Okay. It just started storming, like, insanely.
Oh, no.
Nice.
And, like, I got water hitting my window and thunder and...
Oh, it's such a beautiful day here in Minnesota right now.
It is
Man,
actually super nice.
we are all going to go catch Pokemon afterwards
I'm really
outside.
excited about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in order to
suck.
further that goal, I will give my quick review. I don't think it's a surprise to say that we really enjoyed this book. It's pretty obvious going into it that we thought it was special enough that we'd bring in a third host for it. And the fact that this was one of the books that I said, no, you got to read this one because it's actually good. So for everything that the book gives us, all the character development, more Eric, more actual romance between two of the lead characters, we get massive defeats and major victories. We get the introduction of not just one god character, but another one who's evil. And it furthers the series. It breathes new life into the series, which was much needed. at this point, and for all of it, I can't really even point out too many flaws. I don't want to talk about flaws in this book. I just like it. So for that reason, it's getting 5 out of 5. Warmaker is screwed. From me.
Nate, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So, again, I have a bit of an outsider perspective. I didn't think I was going to enjoy reading the book, but I ended up really liking it. My comment earlier about liking some more of the... It'd be really great to have some more of the adult themes. That actually kind of came through a little bit in this book, and it's told in a way that's friendly for a younger audience, but... you have some very real concepts here. Like, I guess I don't need to get into detail, but it was a good book. I would give it, of the 3 I've read, I would actually probably say it's my favorite. I guess 5 out of 5?
Wow.
Or 3 out of 3?
Don't feel obligated because I gave it a 5.
No. I like I said, it's my favorite. So, I mean, I feel like in the context of having read the other 2 books, I have to give it a perfect score because that's like it set the bar.
Okay, well, what would you give book 1 then?
Book 1 was probably my least favorite. So,
oh, you're kidding?
No, I preferred Andalite Chronicles. I liked the backstory and
the more wacky sci-fi setup.
Yeah,
and I can see that they were writing book 1 like straight on target for, like you said, like a 12-year-old audience. So they definitely diverted from that later on with like Andalite Chronicles in this book.
Yeah, and I think that may have impacted my liking of it. I thought the story was a little more complex. The first book felt a little kitschy, and again, for the younger audience, it makes sense. But I don't remember what I gave this score of when we did the last podcast for Andalite Chronicles, but
I think Andalite Chronicles you gave a 4 out of 5.
All right,
yeah.
so I'm going to give 3 out of 5
as a non-fan, and then a 3 out of 5 as like a technical or something. I can't remember.
Okay, well,
I thought you gave 2.
It's kind of, it depends on my mood, I guess. But I would give the first book probably a 3 out of 5.
Okay, cool.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's essential.
That's still pretty good.
So you're giving this book a 5 out of 5 what?
You hadn't thought of a clever little rating system yet, had you?
Escorts.
What? Oh,
I don't know if
you're
that's
just
good
going to
or
rip
not.
off what I said?
Which ones?
did you
Which
say?
ones? You got to pick a guild. Warmaker,
no.
Escorts.
I forgot the other guilds.
I already said Warmaker.
He did. Yeah, I can't use that.
Oh.
Merchants Guild.
The gossip
There you go.
guild.
Yeah. The Gossip Guild.
Sure,
there you
Gossip
go.
Guild. That sounds fine.
And okay, well, see, okay, I went into this book hearing so much about it, how great it was, how amazing it was, and I think it lived up to a lot of that. I mean, the clever ending, as we talked about, having these gods really start to explain their game and why they're sticking to it. It answers a lot of questions that, honestly, without this book, a lot of the stuff with Krayak and Limus is a little contrived. It's there to move the plot along, but it doesn't make sense why these gods would be affecting these individuals. This book explained that, like, cleverly and well done. So this book is essential for reading and the series in general. And as a story itself, it does kind of pander to like a kind of blockbuster feel to it. Like it's a one big storyline, one big fight that they're trying to figure out and take these howlers down, and it moves on to deeper stuff, and so it does cross the range of what we like about Animorphs and what we generally want from these books when we sit down to read the later ones. That said, I'm going to be a little more critical than you two in the sense that for a series that, in my mind, has created some iconic imagery with its aliens, with its worlds, with some of that stuff, this one really crapped the bed for me.
the lazy sort of world building here?
Yeah, the world design... No, not the world building, because the escort concept and their race and the different cultures, I think, are all good. But the actual descriptions of what they looked like was nonsensical and dumb.
Right.
Like, it was not good. And to me... the aliens are a big part of this book series. They're huge. Even the stuff like the Lyrons, the other aliens they run into, and multiple other ones, they at least like make sense, or I can picture them. These ones, they were just, I mean, I don't think they spent a lot of time on that, which they had bigger things to worry about at this point in the series. But still, that really hurt the book for me, to the point where I literally had to make up my own alien to insert here to make the story work.
Right, that and the word escort is just hard to pronounce and dumb.
It's just, so to me, that actually was like, that takes it, even as great as this book is, which I do think it's a great book and essential, that takes it down 2 pegs for me. I can't say that this is anything more than a 3 out of 5, because the design, like being able to describe, when you're doing alien races and stuff, being able to describe that in a way that makes sense for the story you're telling, that's huge. That's a big part of why I read books. And so to really crap that one on this one, it really hurt the book for me until I just ignored the authors.
Sure. Well, that's an awesome, wild variation in reasons we like this book and our scores, especially.
Yeah, and mine is you didn't let me say what it was. It's a 3 out of 5 consumer escorts.
Oh, there you go.
I like those
none
guys.
of us said, 5 out of 5 Krayax or whatever.
I thought about it.
Yeah.
You could have. It would have been an
5
easy
out of 5 giant red eyes.
There you go.
5 out of 5 Saurons.
Red eyes.
That would have been good. I would have laughed if you would have said that.
Yeah, this opportunity.
All right. Well, that's that. Yeah, that winds down our review of Animorphs book number 26, The Attack. Thank goodness we're done with that. And we can finally move on to murkier waters, I should say.
Well, we've still got book 33, which is the real last K. Applegate written
Until
one.
the last 2.
Until the last 2 books.
And of course, all the good Megamorphs we're going to be reading, because the next 2 Megamorphs are
to get
amazing.
More Megamorphs. Yeah, they're great Megamorphs. I cannot wait.
Megamorph. That sounds exciting.
Megamorphs are, there's a series of 5 books they did alongside this series where they're not, I mean, they are important to the overall plot, but they don't really affect things. And they're like, literally, if the Animorphs book series is a TV show, the Megamorphs are movies. Okay. They're like big, huge stories.
Yeah, they're more cinematic and a little bit more deeper involved. They're a little bit longer, and they are from the perspective of multiple characters. They jump around throughout the whole cast.
Each chapter is a different character in the book.
Pretty mega.
And it's Game of Thrones.
Yeah, that's exactly
it's flat out Game of Thrones.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it works so much better for the Animorphs series. And, if they did a sequel series, I would really like to see them switch to this more character-based chapter structure.
Yeah. And so, like, just to give you an idea of their scale, the last book, they went back into the time of dinosaurs and had to survive with their morphing ability with dinosaurs. And the next book, is the next book the time-traveling one?
Yes, the next book is, well, they both technically are. The third Megamorphs is where, they're time-traveling to the past to fight the Yeerks. And then the fourth Megamorphs book is where they travel to an alternate future where the Yeerks have already won.
No, you're wrong.
Or it's an alternate past where the Yeerks have won.
No, you're wrong. Still, so the next book is, like you said, you're right. It's they get jumped around. So, Nate, you remember in Andalite Chronicles where they had the time sphere?
Yep.
Oh yeah, that finally comes back.
In the next Megamorphs book, Yeerk, Subvisor 4 or something like that, he finds that time sphere and he goes back throughout history and changes Earth historical events to make a better world for the Yeerks to take over. So he has George Washington get killed on the Delaware, and he has England lose the Trafalgar.
The Battle of Trafalgar.
Battle of Trafalgar. Henry VIII. He has a different side win, and Henry gets killed. He just goes throughout all these huge events in history.
He basically changes America into a shittier version of America that's easier to take over, because their whole operation is centered around America. So
of course
it's really cool. It's very much like a history lesson.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and so they have to go back. They follow him back through time and try to fix things. Okay. And then the Megamorphs after that is the entire series rewritten. If the kids had never gotten their morphing abilities, if they had never been in that construction, if they had never been in that construction site, how would the Yeerk invasion would have happened to each of them without knowing about it or having morphing abilities.
So it's really like an alternate book one.
It goes, I mean, like, Tobias is a sad super loner kid who ends up falling in with the sharing because it offers like friends and family, and he becomes infested, and he's a Yeerk in that book. And like, you know, it gets crazy. And the invasion happens way earlier because, like, you know, the Animorphs weren't there to like stop things.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
it's crazy.
Is it basically canon, or does it end in such a way that it could fit back into the series?
It fits back in the series.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. They're really nice.
Most of them are
books.
Ellimist. Yeah, most of them have to do with the Ellimist. Except the
Except
dinosaur one where they were
the dinosaur one where they're sent back in time by a nuclear explosion.
Like a submarine, a nuke sub was like off the coast and was like leaking, and then it blows up while they try to help, and it sends them back in time. And so they have to create another explosion that will send them forward in time.
Is that all it takes?
Yeah, it's apparently that's one of our flaws, I think, in reading that book was the ending. But
well, no. I now believe that the Ellimist, because he cares about them being in the right place at the right time, he guided his hand a little bit and to make sure they blew back into the right
I bet
eras.
the Ellimist was the reason why those crab people were on Earth in the first place in the time of the dinosaurs. Because yes, they do encounter an alien race that's inhabiting Earth back in the time of the dinosaurs that help them to get back.
And we find out the very important detail that broccoli is actually an alien import to our planet.
Right.
No,
I actually do have one question, and this is probably explained at some point in the books. Maybe not.
Sure.
Every series seems to have its out. And it'd be kind of funny if I actually brought this up in the last podcast you guys invited me to. But is the topic of language ever covered? How do all these races, how are they able to communicate with one another?
Well, because it's not necessarily language as it is Thoughtspeak, which is what most of the aliens use. And Thoughtspeak is not so much a language as it is like a mental form of communication that interprets the other being's thoughts in a way that such a person, like a human who speaks English, would perceive them in English.
Yep.
And that's how it works.
It's like your mind tries to interpret Thoughtspeak, so you don't always get a 1-1 translation, but it's universal for the most part. And they do run into aliens who don't speak the same language, and they just have to deal with it.
Yeah, language is actually very well handled in this series, I thought.
Because the escort actually speak, don't they? I don't think I remember.
No, they do Thoughtspeak.
They speak in
Oh,
Thoughtspeak.
do they? Okay. I must
Thoughtspeak.
just have somehow
Well,
glanced over that.
after a while, you stop paying attention to the little greter than less than brackets, you know?
Right.
But no, they do try to establish lots of rules throughout the series for alien things like language and such. And they do a pretty good job of it.
Yeah, and the Yeerks they don't have to worry about because the Yeerks take over whatever brain they're in and can speak that language.
Right,
So.
and then they basically just speak as humans.
Yep.
In fact, one of the most interesting books in the series is the Visor 1 book called just plainly Visor. It's a story
That's
of...
the Visor Chronicles, basically.
Yeah. It's the story of how Visor 1 came to Earth, inhabited the first human body, and started learning about and coincidentally kind of falling in love with humans. And that's a fantastic book that you should read, Nate.
And that's a dark book because that one deals with like the Visor letting her host body like do drugs and have sex just to keep her happy.
Interesting.
And yeah, like it gets pretty dark.
It's a great companion piece to this series, and it definitely does something for explaining Visor 1's character way more, which of course, Nate doesn't know, but Visor 1 is Marco's mom.
What? Spoilers?
Yeah, the Visor 1, the Yeerk, is in Marco's mom's body. That's her controller. And so, it's introduced in like book 17
Also,
or something. Like,
the
or book
first
15.
human controller, important to note.
Yeah. Well, that host isn't the first human controller, but that Visor, that Yeerk, was the first Yeerk to take a human body.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Wait, no, it's not, because technically it happens
you're right.
after the
It
Andalite
happens in the
Chronicles.
Andalite Chronicles. You're right.
Yeah, so...
But she was one of the
anyway.
first to really understand the potential of the human species.
Yeah,
Boom.
well, I mean, like, the great thing about Visor Chronicles is because it does have current events that are taking place in the Animorphs universe, where the Animorphs are actually like affecting it, and Visitor 3 is there doing stuff. But all the flashback stuff plays as like an amazing like sci-fi book series about a parasitic alien invasion on a planet, like from the perspective of the parasites.
Really, the Animorphs is just a modern retelling of Invasion of the Body Snatchers if the humans actually had a weapon to fight back, which would be, the morphing ability.
Pretty much every single one of those movies, all the remakes end with humans being taken out. So
yeah.
I'm glad we had the morphine ability.
Yeah, right. It's the only weapon we have, essentially. So really, that's all we have on book 26, The Attack. However, we would love for you all to come back next time and listen to us talk about book number 27, The Exposed, which is another Rachel book. And boy, I don't think we're too excited to get to this one. I'll be honest with you.
I've not heard great things.
I am kind of excited in that it's one that I haven't read, and it's one that this is not. I don't know what the community's opinion on The Exposed is, to be honest with you. It's another chi-centric book, so that's kind of enticing to me, I'll say.
Yeah, it's weird that it seems like, and I obviously can't say it for this one because it's being ghostwritten, but there does seem to be a lot of books in the series where like one of the alien races is prominent in the book, and then the next book they're also prominent. Like it's happened a couple times with the Ellimist. It's happened a couple times with the Chi, where like the next book after is like, oh, here's another Chi book. You like them in the last one? Here you go.
Sure.
Have another.
Yeah. Well, in this case, I don't mind it because whenever we see them get missions from Eric, it's always pretty entertaining. Those are always some of the better books, I think. So it'll be really interesting to see how they incorporate this squid morph into this story.
It's weird to me that they, for their first ghostwritten book, because they said in interviews that most of the ghostwriters weren't familiar with the series. So it's weird that they wrote an outline for one of the weirdest races in the books. Like they didn't try to do something more normal to like ease into ghostwriters. They just threw them in and hope for the best.
Well, sure. I mean, they're doing a sci-fi series, so I think the assumption there was that if their ghostwriters are any good at being sci-fi writers, they should be able to just dive right in and capture the feeling of these books.
And they were wrong.
Well, in some cases, like I said, some of my favorite books are ghostwritten.
Me too.
And I think a big fact or a big reason why is because, the Applegates, the Grants were there doing the outlines for these books. These are ideas that they initially had, and maybe the ghostwriter kind of expanded on, is all.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. And honestly, I don't know what book we would like to get Nate back in on, but boy, we would love to have you again in the future someday.
Absolutely.
Like I said, not for The Exposed. We'll leave you out on that one, but some of these Megamorphs, some of these Chronicles books, they're excellent pieces to bring you in on, and
they're one shots, so they don't deal with as much backstory and things like that. They're just jump right in.
Sure. Yeah.
I also really, yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
That's all.
We want you involved. And I really like the outsider perspective that you're able to give us, and kind of the fact that Coleman and I are basically controlling the narrative of Animorphs for you, because we've had you read the prequel, the first book, and then this well-established later in the series book. We're going to have you jump ahead again, and I promise you it will be a distinctively different feeling. With these characters,
we could go straight from Jake and Cassie's first kiss to Cassie screwing Jake and the rest of the Animorphs over,
right.
and no one trusting her
to
again.
their first fight, or their first inner turmoil. Essentially.
Spoilers, guys.
There's a lot of drama, and there's a lot of mistakes and failures to be had throughout the series.
See, Nate, what you don't understand is I'm using spoilers not as things that are going to ruin the series for you, but like, oh wait, that sounds really cool.
Yeah, he's trying to lure you in, man. There's good stuff to come. There's reason why we're talking about these books, as I hope you've seen thus far.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm honestly, I'm really surprised that the story is as depthy. You can use that word. As depthy as
Ooh,
it is.
depths, just like in The Exposed.
Yeah.
That was a bad joke. That was a
Yeah,
bad joke.
I got it.
The exposed takes place underwater. So
He's not
depths.
looking at the cover of the book like I am.
Well, you showed
would've
it to
made
me.
more
You showed it
sense.
to me before we started.
He exposed you to
Yeah,
it.
it was really dirty. I felt a little, I don't know. weird about it.
Well, that's Thoughtspeak for this, folks. Whoa, that's nonsense.
That's Thoughtspeak, folks, for this week.
I said I'm going to say this week for you folks or something like
Exactly. No promises on when the next episode is coming out, but we're hoping that it'll be in less time than it took to get this one out for sure. It's very important that you all check out our website, thoughtspeakcast.com, for further updates. We are also highly active on Facebook, mostly at facebook.com/thoughtspeak. Just want to give a shout out to a Connor Muldowney who actually messaged me on there this morning, just to say, you guys are the best. And you know what?
Connor, you're the best.
Yeah, exactly. Connor, people like you are the best. And people like you are the reason why we're still doing this podcast, even at the sluggish pace that we've been scooting at so far. It's been a trying year, this 2016, but we're making the best of it. And we've got a lot of projects underway that we're working on still, but we always want you guys to come back and check on us. Thoughtspeakcast.com, Facebook/Thoughtspeakcast. And that's really all I got for you. So on behalf of the podcast, I just want to thank Nate once again for coming out. For letting us record in your basement.
That's all right.
I mentioned it's a lovely sunny day in Minnesota, and here we are stuck inside in your basement. Thank you so much. And Nate, Coleman, you got anything else?
Just that, I mean, we really appreciate everything you guys said to us and all the new reviews we've gotten. It really is our audience, the only reason that we're doing this. I mean, we love getting together and talking about Animorphs and having a podcast at all. But as Mitch and I are like going out and doing our own thing and starting another podcast, you know, we have no plans to leave this one behind, and we want to finish the series strong and have this be a nice archive for people to either get into the series or be nostalgic about it. And that's what the podcast has been so far. So it's great that we can continue doing it, and it's because of people like Connor here who messaged us on Facebook randomly and say, hey, you guys are great.
Yes,
we agree.
Thanks. Yeah. And on another note, I just want to point out that we understand that you people have a lot of options now for Animorphs themed entertainment. There are a number of podcasts popping up, and we just want to say thank you so much for sticking with us. If that's the case, we encourage you to check some of the other guys out. I know that they can be pretty entertaining as well. And if you're interested in a more free-form kind of discussion centered around each book, keep coming back and listening to us, because we'll try desperately to entertain you throughout.
So that's it for this week. Again, thank you guys, and jump on iTunes if you want and leave us a review. That helps out the show a lot. We'll keep you posted on when Nate comes back to the show. We'll have Nate watch 2016 on
Probably 2017, more likely.
2017, 2018.
It's only 5 months
something
away.
like that. But we'll put a clicker on the website and just if we'll post rumors about maybe him showing up.
Exactly. And you know what?
Was that Nate? I don't know. Is he recording?
It'll really help to leave these kind reviews, kind comments on our Facebook, encouraging Nate to come back on.
We need to set up a voting system to bring him back.
And then I never come back again because everyone votes no.
No, I don't think that'll happen. Tell him he's wrong.
Who else have we had guest star on the podcast?
So far, just
Nate,
Liz.
Nate and my wife. Yeah.
Just Nate and your wife.
Yeah, she wasn't even my wife at the time.
Right. We're looking to get more guests, but show Nate some love and some kind words, and we will be back to bring you a book that neither of us have read and don't know what to expect.
What to read?
Exactly. So join us next time when we talk about The Exposed. But until then, I have been one of your tripod hosts, Mitchell.
I have been another tripod leg, Coleman.
And me, the third tripod leg this time around, Nate.
I like this imagery a lot. Tripod.
So wait, are we just like balancing all the times that Nate's not here? Is like his leg broken?
We've been making it work with two this far. We've been a duo pod, and it's kind of worked out. I don't know how.
You're like
it's
a person.
wobbly legs or something.
He's got feet.
Oh, yeah, we're a person.
Exactly. So
How do people walk on these two legs?
come back next time for just the duo. I promise it'll be just as good.
Probably. Maybe.